Imagine taking like one of those painfully complex, deeply entrenched geopolitical conflicts in human history and just zooming all the way out.
Right, just getting completely out of the weeds.
Exactly. But instead of zooming out in space, I want you to zoom out in time. Like you fly back past the modern borders,
Mhm.
past the endless 24-hour news
Plus
cycles.
the missiles, the treaties, all of that.
Yeah, all of it. You keep going back past the formation of modern nations, past empires rising and falling, until you are standing completely still inside a single ancient family tent.
Oh, wow. That's quite a visual.
It is, right? It's perfectly quiet. The desert stretches out in every direction. And inside that tent is just a family wrestling with some very human, very ordinary fears.
I mean, it's an incredibly powerful image to start with because it immediately strips away all the modern deafening noise.
Yeah.
It forces us to look at the absolute bare bones foundation of something that just feels entirely too massive to comprehend today.
Completely. It scales the geopolitical right down to the personal.
Exactly.
And that is the exact journey we are taking in today's deep dive. We're exploring a really fascinating essay titled One Root, Many Branches.
It's such a compelling piece of writing.
It really is. It offers this philosophical, almost spiritual reflection on the shared origins of the Jewish and Arab peoples. It strips away all that modern political machinery to look at the psychological roots of division.
And it focuses heavily on the feminine perspective, which is so often ignored, and a pretty radical redefinition of what peace actually means in practice.
Right. But before we get into the weeds, I do want to set some ground rules for you, the listener, because obviously we are dealing with deeply sensitive, highly politically charged topics here.
Oh, absolutely. The stakes are very high.
So I just want to be crystal clear. Our mission in this deep dive is entirely impartial. We are not endorsing any political side. We aren't validating the historical or archaeological accuracy of these claims.
Right. We're strictly exploring the philosophical and emotional arguments that this specific author is making in this text.
Exactly. We just want to see what insights it offers about human nature and conflict. So, with that established, let's go back to the absolute beginning. Can you take us into that tent?
Yeah, let's do it. So the author pulls us straight into the origin story of Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. And the beauty of this framework is that it asks us to view this thousands of years old narrative not as a rigid political manifesto.
Right, or like a strict historical textbook.
Exactly. But rather as a deeply human, incredibly messy family drama. It's essentially a psychological thought experiment about where conflict actually comes from.
Okay, let's unpack this living room drama because the stakes start out so intimate.
Yeah.
What exactly is the dynamic in this tent that, sets the stage for millennia of history?
Well, the underlying catalyst here isn't clashing ideologies or some dispute over borders. It's really a story of profound longing and, frankly, unintended consequences.
Yeah.
It begins with Sarah, the wife of Abraham. She is unable to conceive. And out of a deeply complex mixture of generosity, societal pressure, and quiet desperation, she offers her Egyptian handmaid, Hagar, to her husband Abraham.
Wow. I mean, the goal there is simple, right? So that they might finally have a child in their household,
Exactly.
which is such a striking paradox when you really think about it. The foundation of this massive world-shaping divide begins with an act of radical selflessness.
It really does.
I mean, a woman sharing her husband, compromising her own exclusive relationship just to build a family.
Precisely. And from that deeply vulnerable arrangement, Hagar conceives. She gives birth to a son, Ishmael, who is considered by many traditions to be the patriarch of the Arab peoples.
Okay.
But then the dynamic shifts dramatically because, against all biological odds, Sarah herself conceives later on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she gives birth to Isaac, who is considered the patriarch of the Jewish people.
And suddenly, that one quiet desert tent is suffocatingly crowded. I mean, you have two sons, two mothers, one father, and a terrifyingly finite amount of security.
That finite security is the absolute key here. Tension arises. Jealousy takes root. Sarah becomes fiercely, existentially protective of Isaac's inheritance and his future.
Which leads to her making a massive demand.
Yeah, she ultimately asks Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. And so Hagar and Ishmael are exiled out into the harshness of the desert.
It's essentially a tragic family inheritance dispute. But instead of the usual dynamic where, cousins just stop talking to each other at Thanksgiving or bicker through probate attorneys,
Right.
this specific fracture ends up echoing across millennia. And the profound tragedy, the real heartbreak at the center of this essay, is the proximity of these two boys.
They are so close.
Yeah. Ishmael and Isaac share the exact same father, They have the same lineage. They trace back to the exact same source. It's a tragedy of closeness, not distance.
And that leads to a core thesis of this philosophy. What's fascinating here is that this massive divide did not begin with hatred. It didn't begin with a calculated war room or some grand desire for conquest.
Right.
It began with deeply human vulnerabilities. One woman's grief, another woman's fear, and a husband who is passively caught in the middle. The author's argument is that modern conflicts of this scale are often just ancient wounds left unaddressed.
An ancient wound left unaddressed.
Yeah.
Man, that phrasing really sticks with you.
It really does.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to play devil's advocate or push back a little on how we might instinctively read this story today.
Sure, go for it.
It is incredibly easy for us, sitting comfortably in the modern world, to psychoanalyze Sarah's jealousy, just to say she was being petty or cruel to Hagar. But isn't that a massive failure of empathy on our part?
Oh, entirely.
I mean, we have to look at the sheer terror of her reality, right?
Yeah.
Is it really fair to judge her through a modern lens?
The author actually addresses this directly and validates exactly what you're asking, because that context is crucial to understanding the mechanism of the conflict. In the ancient patriarchal world, a woman's entire worth, her physical security, her social safety net, her legacy, were strictly, unequivocally tied to her ability to produce male heirs.
Right. I mean, she didn't have a 401k. She didn't have property rights independent of a man.
Exactly.
If Abraham dies and Ishmael inherits everything as the eldest, Sarah and her son Isaac are entirely at the mercy of Hagar and Ishmael.
Yes.
Her jealousy wasn't just a bruised ego, it was existential terror. Her survival was literally on the line.
Precisely. Her fear was completely understandable, driven by an economic and social system that artificially manufactured scarcity. The essay asks us to recognize that Sarah was not a nationalist.
No.
She was not a warmonger drafting battle plans. She was simply a terrified mother trying to protect her child in a very unforgiving, precarious world. And her initial act of sharing her husband, like you said, was remarkably selfless.
So if Sarah's initial instinct was purely maternal and protective, it really makes you wonder how that desperate survival tactic mutated into the kind of ideological warfare we see today.
It's a massive shift.
Which brings up a thought experiment in the essay that I found completely devastating. It asks us to imagine bringing Sarah forward in time to the present day.
Yeah, it asks, what if Sarah could see what has unfolded from that single panicked moment in the tent? What if she could see the millennia of conflict waged by men in her name and in the name of her son's descendants?
If you sat her down in front of a modern news broadcast, showing the missiles, the rhetoric, the sheer industrial scale of the violence, all supposedly rooted in protecting her legacy.
The author's conclusion is that she would weep uncontrollably because the wars being fought today are not wars she ever would have sanctioned. She wanted a safe tent for her child, not a burning world.
It really reframes the whole concept of what it means to honor your ancestors. We often use ancestors to justify our entrenched positions.
We do, all the time.
But this philosophy suggests that if we truly wanted to honor Sarah, we would ask what a mother would actually want for her grandchildren today. And that means all of them, Ishmael's descendants and Isaac's descendants alike.
The text argues she would want coexistence. She would want the world to recognize that her initial act in that tent was one of longing to create life, not a mandate to endlessly destroy it.
That perfectly bridges into the broader conceptual shift in the essay. Because if we acknowledge that Sarah's protected maternal instinct was hijacked by a system of patriarchal scarcity, we have to look at how that system scales up.
Right, zooming out again.
Exactly. The essay zooms out way past the Abrahamic tent, looking at what it calls the feminine principle. What exactly is that?
So it explores the idea that before these rigid patriarchal religious and governance structures took hold, ancient cultures often recognized a primordial feminine force, a mother goddess or a mother earth.
Okay.
And the defining mechanism of this primordial mother is that she births all things, holds all life, and crucially, she does not divide her children into worthy and unworthy.
So what does this actually mean for how we govern today? Because it's really easy to dismiss mother goddess theology as just like ancient mythology.
Sure.
But the essay is arguing for this as a practical model of governance, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
When I was reading this, I kept thinking about an analogy. The erasure of the feminine from geopolitics is like trying to fly a plane with half the navigation instruments turned off.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You're bound to crash. The author makes a clear distinction that this is an argument for balance, not an argument against men.
Yes, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text defines feminine wisdom not as being soft or passive, but as favoring negotiation, integration, and cyclical renewal over endless linear warfare.
Which makes sense?
The author believes that the erasure of women and mothers from peacemaking has actually made the world more violently reactive. The core advice of the text is incredibly direct. It says, before sending sons and daughters to die, ask the mothers.
Ask the mothers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they intimately know the mathematics of life. They know the physical, emotional, and temporal cost of creating a human being. Their threshold for spending that life in a war is remarkably high.
Right, because they've paid the price to create it.
Exactly. So their answer to whether we should drop the bomb or launch the missile will almost always be to find another way.
Find another way. Because the current way is based on a fundamental lie. Which brings us to the most challenging part of this entire philosophy, at least for me, the illusion of the other.
This is where it gets really deep.
Yeah. Think about the reality of this. If we accept the premise that these two peoples are fundamentally family, tracing back to the same father, the same desert tent, the same origin, then going to war against each other takes on a horrifying new dimension.
It becomes an act of profound self-harm. The author's ultimate conclusion is that declaring war against a neighboring nation that shares your bloodline is fundamentally an illusion.
An illusion.
Yes. It relies on the psychological trick that destroying the enemy will somehow heal or protect yourself. But if the enemy shares your origin, what are you actually destroying? You are essentially burning down your own family tree while locked inside the branches.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, though, and I want to push on this hard.
Go for it.
Let's say I accept this beautiful premise. We are all one family. War is a tragic illusion. If that is our deepest, most fundamental truth, why is it so incredibly easy to make us forget it?
That is the big question.
Right. Why does the machinery of nationalism work so flawlessly? Why can a politician stand on a podium, give a 20-minute speech, and suddenly millions of people are completely convinced that the annihilation of the other side is absolutely necessary? If it's an illusion, why do we buy it so quickly?
The author uses the text to answer exactly that. The illusion is incredibly well-funded and psychologically potent. The mechanisms perpetuating modern conflict, things like propaganda, greed, religious fundamentalism, they thrive on disconnection.
They need us to forget.
Exactly. They actively manufacture historical amnesia. They make us forget the shared tent. If a leader can convince you that the person across the border is fundamentally biologically different from you, a monster, then you will hand over your civil liberties and your children to that leader.
They scale up Sarah's ancient fear of scarcity. They tell us there isn't enough security for both sides.
Yes. And the essay highlights a powerful redefinition of peace in response to this, because peace is often viewed as naive or weak or surrender.
Yeah, a lot of people cynically view it that way, like it's just letting people hurt you.
But the author argues that true peace is the most courageous act possible, because continuing the war is actually the path of least resistance. War allows you to hold on to the comforting, simplistic story that the other person is a monster and you are the righteous victim.
Wow. It's so much easier to stay angry than to admit you're both just terrified.
Precisely. Peace requires laying down that comforting story that the other is your enemy and picking up the much harder truth that they are your kin.
Laying down the story of the enemy and picking up the story of kin, that is a profound, heavy lift. It means acknowledging that those two boys, Ishmael and Isaac, weren't ancient enemies destined to clash. They were just the collateral damage of adults who were terrified.
And that very human terror has echoed for millennia. But the philosophy leaves us with hope. The mechanism for healing is simply remembering our shared history.
Remembering the shared origin. So to wrap this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why does a philosophical essay about an ancient desert family matter to your life right now?
It's a great question to ask.
Whether you're looking at global geopolitics or maybe just navigating intense, gridlocked conflicts in your own life, a rift in your family, a toxic dynamic at work, this text challenges you to look past the modern machinery of the argument.
Right, look past the itemized list of grievances.
Exactly. Seek out the shared origin. We're all many branches of one root, and recognizing that shared humanity is the absolute mandatory first step toward resolution.
It's about having the incredible courage to stop burning down our own family trees, however we define that family.
Beautifully said. I want to leave you with a thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Think about a deep calcified division in your own life, your community, or your family.
Something where you feel entirely justified in your anger.
Right. if you trace that conflict all the way back to its absolute origin, to its own ancient intent, would you find a true ideological enemy? Or would you just find an ancient forgotten fear? And if it's just fear at the root of it all, what would it look like to finally say, enough, come home?